The human fleet arrived at Assembly Station 3 weeks after the evacuation. Every ship was damaged. Radiation scoring marked the hulls. The cargo bays were filled with 4 million Velkari, all alive, all safe, all still struggling to believe what had happened. Captain Taeyang stood on the bridge of his flagship and looked at his crew. They were thin, exhausted, marked by radiation burns and heat damage. Every single person would carry the effects of Velkan Prime for the rest of their lives. Some would die young from complications. All would have health problems. None of them complained. They simply did their jobs, prepared for docking, and helped the Velkari transfer to temporary housing facilities. The Galactic Assembly called an emergency session. Every species was present. The observation footage from Velkan Prime had spread across all civilized space. Everyone had seen what the humans did. Everyone had seen the impossible become reality. The Assembly President stood at the center of the chamber. He was old and wise, and he had seen many things in his long life. But he had never seen anything like this. The Assembly owes humanity an apology, he began. His voice was heavy with emotion. We called them primitive. We dismissed them as reckless Deathworlders. We said the mission was impossible. We were wrong about all of it. He gestured to the screens showing footage from the rescue. We watched humans work in conditions rated as immediately lethal for 73% of known species. We watched them endure radiation that should have killed them within hours. We watched them carry our people to safety until their bodies failed, then watched them get up and continue. The chamber was absolutely silent. We have no explanation for this, the president continued. By every measure we understand, the rescue should have failed. The humans should have died or retreated. They did neither. They simply worked until the job was finished. He turned to face Taeyang, who stood in the human section with his crew. Captain Kim, the Assembly formally apologizes for underestimating your species. We apologize for calling the mission impossible. Most of all, we apologize for not helping when help was needed. Taeyang stepped forward. He looked tired but stood straight. We did not do this for recognition. We did it because people needed help. That is what humans do. We see someone in trouble and we help. It is that simple. But the cost, someone began, is not as high as the cost of doing nothing, Taeyang said firmly. Yes, my people are injured. Yes, we will carry these wounds forever. But 4 million people are alive who would be dead. That is worth any price. The Velkari ambassador came forward slowly. She had been crying for 3 weeks straight. Her people were safe, but she could not forget what it had cost the humans. We have no words sufficient to thank you, she said, her voice breaking. You risked everything for strangers. You suffered beyond measure for people you had never met. Why? We still do not understand why. Ambassador Mirai Han, who had been on Velkan Prime for the entire rescue, spoke up. She looked worn and tired, her hair graying from stress and radiation exposure. You keep asking why, as if there needs to be a complex reason. The reason is simple. You needed help. We could provide it. That is all. But you gained nothing. We gained 4 million living people instead of 4 million dead ones. Mirai interrupted gently. That is everything. That is all that matters. The Velkari elder who Taeyang had carried to safety approached him slowly. She moved carefully, still adjusting to her new temporary home. She reached up and touched his face, the way her people showed respect. My people wish to make a request, she said softly. We wish to settle near Earth, under Earth's protection. We wish to be close to the species that saved us. Will you accept us? Taeyang smiled. Of course. You are welcome near our world. You are welcome to build a new home. You are no longer strangers. You are friends now. The elder began to cry again. We will tell our children about this, and our children's children. For all time, Velkari will remember the day the Deathworlders came to save us. The Assembly created a new designation that day. Human Protocol Missions. Operations too dangerous for standard species. Conditions that required the unique endurance of Earth's people. The galaxy had learned that some missions were not impossible. They just required humans. Within weeks, requests began coming in. A mining accident on Theta 7. Humans were asked to help with the deep rescue. A disease outbreak on Cordath Prime. Human doctors were requested for their ability to work long hours without rest. A station fire near Gamma Station. Human engineers were needed for repairs in dangerous conditions. Humans answered every call. They went to dangerous places. They worked in terrible conditions. They endured what others could not. And they never asked for anything except the chance to help. 1 year later, a memorial was built on New Velkara, the Velkari's new homeworld. It was a massive wall made of blue crystal that caught the light of their new sun. On it were inscribed 2,000 names. Every human who had gone to Velkon Prime. Every person who had suffered to save strangers. Kyung-Soo Lee stood before the memorial with other crew members. He still walked with a cane, his body permanently damaged by the radiation and heat. But he was alive. They were all alive. A young Velkari child approached him carefully. She had been one of the people saved from the collapsed shelter. She looked up at Kyung-Soo with wide eyes. "Why did you come?" she asked through a translator. "You did not know us." Kyung-Soo knelt down slowly, his damaged body protesting the movement. "You called for help. We heard you. That is enough reason. But you got hurt." "Yes. But you are alive. That is more important." The child thought about this carefully. "Would you do it again? Even knowing you would get hurt?" Kyung-Soo looked at the memorial, at the names of his friends and comrades. He looked at the thriving Velkari settlement, at the children playing in the water gardens, at the adults building a new life. He looked at all the life that existed because humans had said, "We will help." Every single time, he said firmly. We would do it every single time. The child hugged him carefully, mindful of his injuries. Then she ran off to play with other children, alive and happy and safe. Kyung-Soo watched her go. Beside him, Do-yoon approached. The engineer also showed signs of permanent damage. His hands shook sometimes and he tired easily. But he was smiling. "Do you regret it?" Do-yoon asked quietly. "Never," Kyung-Soo replied. "You?" Not for a moment. They stood together in comfortable silence watching the settlement. Around them other crew members gathered. Ji-woo with her persistent cough from the dust and heat. Hye-erin with her damaged eyes from the radiation. Chung-woo moving slowly, his body still recovering. All of them damaged. All of them changed forever. None of them regretful. Because they had proven something the galaxy needed to learn. Strength was not just about physical power. It was not about having the best technology or the strongest bodies. Real strength was the willingness to endure suffering to protect others. Real strength was seeing someone in need and saying, "I will help," even when help was dangerous. Humans were not invincible. They were not fearless. They were not even particularly special in most ways. But they had something that mattered more than any advantage. They had the determination to help, no matter the cost. Captain Taiyang watched the memorial dedication from a distance. He was back on Earth now, recovering from his own radiation damage. But he watched the ceremony through a live feed and felt pride in his chest. His communication panel lit up. Another request, a chemical spill on Durain 4. Standard species could not handle the toxic environment. Could humans help? Taiyang looked at the request. It would be dangerous. People would get hurt. The conditions were terrible. It was exactly the kind of mission everyone else would call impossible. He pressed the accept button without hesitation. "We are coming," he transmitted. "Hold on, we are coming." Because that was what humans did. When someone cried for help, when everyone else said it could not be done, humans looked at the impossible task and said the same thing they always said. "We will find a way." The galaxy had learned its lesson. When the situation was desperate, when the mission was impossible, when no one else could help, that was when you called the humans, the Deathworlders, the ones who refused to give up, the ones who would walk through hell itself rather than let someone die. They were not the strongest species. They were not the smartest or the fastest. But they were the ones who would answer when others called for help. They were the ones who would endure any suffering to save strangers. They were the ones who proved that sometimes courage and determination mattered more than any physical advantage. The Valkyrie would tell their children about the day their world died and the day the humans came. They would pass down the story for generations. They would never forget the beings who suffered so they could live. And across the galaxy, other species were learning the same lesson. When you need someone who will not quit, who will not give up, who will endure anything to do what is right, you call the humans, you call the Deathworlders, and they will always answer, "We are coming." On day 12, everything changed. The dying star flared without warning. The radiation output doubled in 6 hours. The temperature on Velcon Prime jumped from 50 degrees to 62 degrees. The evacuation was only 30% complete. In orbit, the assembly observer ships immediately retreated. Their sensors showed radiation levels that would kill their crews within hours. The Threnody ship jumped away entirely. The Paxiri vessel moved to a safe distance 3 times farther out. Only the human fleet stayed in close orbit. Captain Tai Yang stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the radiation numbers climb. His science officer looked at him with worried eyes. "Captain, we need to evacuate non-essential personnel from the surface. These levels are approaching lethal. Our suits will only protect for 2 hours now, maybe less." Tai Yang studied the numbers carefully. 2.8 million Valkyrie still needed rescue. If they pulled back now, those people would die. If they stayed, his crew would face almost certain radiation poisoning. "Send the message," he said finally. "All non-essential personnel are authorized to evacuate to the fleet. Anyone who wants to leave can leave. No judgment, no consequences." The message went out across all human channels. In the loading stations, on construction sites, in medical facilities, every human heard the offer. They could leave. They could save themselves. Not one person left. Instead, something else happened. A message came from Earth. 300 additional volunteers were coming. They had pushed their ships to 2.2 G acceleration for 6 straight days to cut travel time. 12 of them were hospitalized from the sustained stress. They still insisted on working once they arrived. Engineer Doyen received the news while building radiation shelters. The heat inside his suit was unbearable. His radiation badge had turned from green to yellow to orange. Another few days and it would turn red, the level where permanent damage began. He did not care. He just kept building. A Valkyrie observer watched him work. "Why do you not leave?" "You could save yourself." Doyen paused to drink water through his suit tube. "Could I? Could I really go home knowing we left 3 million people to die? Could I sleep at night? Could I look at myself in a mirror?" "But you will die if you stay." "Maybe," Doyen agreed. "Probably will get very sick at least. But I will be alive to get sick. These people won't be alive at all if we quit." He went back to work. In the medical facility, Hyarin was overwhelmed. 22 cases of heat exhaustion, 15 radiation burns, 8 workers with dangerous exposure levels. She treated them all, working without rest for 16 straight hours. A Valkyrie doctor worked beside her now, learning human medicine. She watched in amazement as Hyarin treated a worker's severe burns, then immediately moved to the next patient. "You are exhausted," the Valkyrie doctor observed. "Your hands shake. You need rest." "Later," Hyarin said. "After these patients are stable." "When will that be?" Hyarin smiled grimly. "When we run out of patients or I fall over." Whichever comes first, she did not fall over. She kept working. On day 14, disaster struck. A shelter collapsed in the southern district. 300 Valkyrie were trapped inside. The structure was unstable. The radiation inside was immediately lethal. Standard protocol said to wait for proper containment equipment. Lieutenant Sung-Woo Bae led the rescue team. He was young for his rank, only 28 years old. He had kind eyes and a quiet voice. He looked at the collapsed shelter and made a decision. "We go in now. Full radiation gear. 4 teams of 6. We dig them out." His second-in-command hesitated. "Sir, the radiation will kill us if we stay too long." "Yes, I know. So we work fast. Get the equipment." "We move in 5 minutes." They went in wearing every piece of radiation protection available. The shelter was dark and hot and filled with dust. The Valkyrie inside were crying in fear. Many were injured. All were terrified. Shung Wu's team worked in the darkness. They moved rubble by hand. They cut through twisted metal. They carried Velkari to safety one by one, sometimes two at a time. The work was slow and dangerous. The radiation counters on their suits screamed warnings constantly. 1 hour passed. 2 hours. 3 hours. Sir, we need to evacuate, someone called. Our badges are turning black. 10 more minutes, Xiongwu replied. There are still people inside. They worked for 11 total hours. They pulled out all 300 Velkari. Every single person was saved. When Xiongwu finally emerged from the shelter, he took 3 steps and collapsed. His radiation badge was completely black. He had received enough radiation to kill most species 3 times over. Medical teams rushed him to Hyeron's facility. The Velkari he saved gathered outside the medical building. They refused to leave. They stood there in the dangerous heat, waiting for news about the human who had risked everything to save them. When Xiongwu woke up 12 hours later, they were still there. Their translucent faces were pressed against the windows. When they saw him move, they made a sound, a high-pitched keening that humans learned meant joy. Xiongwu was weak, barely able to sit up. But he waved to them. They waved back, their movements full of gratitude. A Velkari elder came into his room. She moved slowly, carefully. You should have left us, she said softly. You should have saved yourself. Xiongwu smiled, though it clearly hurt. That is not how we were trained. We leave no one behind. That is the human way. You may die from this. Maybe. But 300 people are alive who would be dead. That seems like a fair trade. The footage of the rescue spread across the galaxy within hours. Aliens watched in disbelief as humans worked in conditions that should have killed them. They watched humans shield Velkari with their own bodies during radiation spikes. They watched humans carry people to safety until they literally could not stand. One video became famous across every civilized world. It showed Doyen working on his 40th radiation shelter. He worked for 6 straight hours. Then he collapsed from exhaustion. Other workers gave him water and food. He rested for exactly 15 minutes. Then he stood up and started building the 41st shelter. The alien narrator could barely speak. What drives them? What makes them continue when their bodies are failing? How do they endure this? A human voice answered from off-camera. It was Jiwoo passing by the recording. You endure what you must. That is all. The simple answer went viral. You endure what you must. 5 words that seemed to explain everything and nothing about human nature. In the assembly chamber, representatives watched the footage in stunned silence. The Morvash delegate spoke quietly. We called this mission impossible. We were right. It is impossible, but they are doing it anyway. They are paying a terrible price, the Paxiri representative observed. Every single human on that planet will have permanent health damage. Many may die young from the radiation exposure. Do they know this? Someone asked. They know, the president confirmed. They have always known. They went anyway. The Velkari ambassador could not speak. She simply watched her people being saved by beings who had no reason to help, except that help was needed. She watched humans work themselves to exhaustion and beyond. She watched them face death with calm determination. Finally, she found her voice. The galaxy owes them a debt we can never repay. On Velcon Prime, the work continued. Day after day, shift after shift, the heat climbed to 68 degrees. The radiation levels went from dangerous to lethal to catastrophic. The human workers adapted. They shortened shifts to 2 hours. They added extra shielding. They found ways to continue, and they never complained. They never quit. They worked with a determination that the galaxy was beginning to understand meant something profound. Humans were not stronger than other species. They were not faster or smarter, but they had something else. Something that made them able to do what others called impossible. They had endurance, the ability to suffer and continue anyway, the willingness to pay any price to do what was right. 2.3 million Velkari had been evacuated. 1.7 million remained. The star was growing more unstable by the day. Time was running out, but the humans did not slow down. They worked faster. They pushed harder. They endured, because that was what Deathworlders did. They endured. On day 20, reality struck hard. Astrophysicist Nari Kwan stood before Captain Taeyang with terrible news. Her face was pale with exhaustion and fear. The star is collapsing faster than our models predicted, she said quietly. We don't have 23 days left. We have 18 days, maybe less. Taeyang looked at the numbers. 65% evacuated. 1.4 million Velkari still on the planet. 18 days to save them all. The math was brutal. Can we do it? He asked simply. Nari hesitated. If nothing goes wrong, if we increase the pace by 40%, if no one gets too sick to work, if the equipment holds together, if the star doesn't flare again. So many ifs. Too many, Nari agreed. Captain, we should consider— We will not leave anyone behind, Taeyang interrupted firmly. We find a way. That is what we do. He called a meeting with all team leaders. Jiwoo, Doyen, Hieran, Seungwoo, and a dozen others gathered in the command center. They all looked exhausted. They all had radiation burns. They all had the look of people pushed beyond normal limits. Taeyang explained the situation. We need to accelerate. Work shifts extend to 6 hours. Rest periods shrink to 90 minutes. I know this is hard. I know it is dangerous. But 1.4 million people need us. Doyen spoke up. We can do 6-hour shifts, but our bodies will break down. We need a better recovery protocol. Hieran nodded. I can set up IV nutrient systems. We hook people up while they sleep. Their bodies recover faster. It is not comfortable, but it works. Will it keep people functional? Taeyang asked. For 18 days. Maybe. It is a risk. Everything is a risk, Jiwoo said quietly. We take this risk. We save everyone. That is the mission. Everyone agreed. The message went out to all teams. The schedule would change immediately. Longer work hours. Shorter rest. Maximum effort for 18 straight days. The humans accepted it without complaint. They just adjusted their equipment and went back to work. On day 22, the Velkari revealed a secret. The council elder approached Taeyang with obvious shame on her face. There is something we did not tell you, she said softly. Our sacred archives, 10,000 years of history, art, science, culture, everything that makes us who we are. It is in a vault 3 kilometers underground. Taeyang waited. He knew there was more. The vault is flooded, she continued. The cooling systems failed, the water is boiling, the temperature inside is 90 degrees. The radiation there is instantly lethal. We thought, we hoped, but there is no way to retrieve it. You want us to try? No, she said quickly. No, we cannot ask that. It would be suicide. We tell you only so you know. Our history will die with our planet. We accept this. Taeyang was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked, how long would someone need to be inside the vault? Perhaps 40 minutes to reach the archives and return. But no one could survive. 40 minutes, Taeyang repeated. He looked at Jiwoo. Is it possible? Jiwoo thought carefully. Maximum radiation shielding, cooling packs, underwater breathing equipment, stimulants to keep the body functioning. Would it work? I do not know. Would someone survive? Probably not without serious damage. But possibly. Possibly. Taeyang nodded. I will go. No, sir, a voice said from behind them. Kyung-Soo Lee stepped forward. He was a rescue specialist, trained for extreme conditions. This is my job. I am trained for this exact situation. Kyung-Soo, with respect, Captain, you are needed here. I am one rescue specialist among many. If someone must take this risk, it should be me. Before Taeyang could argue, 20 other voices spoke up. I volunteer. I will go. Let me do it. 20 humans willing to walk into boiling radioactive water in complete darkness for 40 minutes. 20 people ready to die for strangers' history books. Kyung-Soo looked at them all. I appreciate it, but I am going alone. One person at risk is enough. He prepared for 3 hours. Every piece of radiation shielding available was layered onto his suit. Cooling packs were installed inside. Chemical stimulants were prepared to inject automatically if his body started to fail. Underwater breathing systems were tested 5 times. The Velkari elder watched with tears streaming down her face. You should not do this, Our history is not worth your life. Kyung-soo smiled at her. Your history is worth everything to your people. That makes it worth saving. Besides, I am very stubborn. I will probably survive just to prove everyone wrong. He descended into the darkness alone. The water was indeed boiling. The radiation counters went immediately to maximum. The heat was beyond anything he had ever experienced. The cooling pack started failing within 10 minutes. 43 minutes later, they pulled him out. The archives were secured. Kyung-soo was unconscious. His body temperature was 41.5 degrees Celsius. His radiation exposure was off every chart. But he was smiling. Hieron worked on him for 6 hours straight. Other medics assisted. They cooled his body slowly to prevent shock. They flushed his system. They gave him every treatment available for radiation exposure. He survived. Barely. He would need treatment for the rest of his life. But he survived. And the archives were safe. When the Velkari elder received the archives, she could not speak. She simply held them and cried. Finally, she whispered, "We will never forget. Never. What you have done will be remembered for all time." The final evacuation push began. With 8 days left, 900,000 Velkari remained. The human workers were beyond exhaustion. They worked in a kind of mechanical determination, their bodies moving on pure willpower. Hieron's medical facility was full. Every human on the planet had some level of radiation sickness. Many had severe heat exhaustion. All had injuries. She treated them as best she could and sent them back to work because that was what they wanted. A young human worker came in with radiation burns on his arms. Hieron treated him while he ate a quick meal. "How long until I can return to work?" he asked. "You should rest for at least 6 hours." "I will rest for 1 hour. People need moving. You will make yourself sicker." "Then I will be sick after everyone is safe." Hieron had no answer to that. She just bandaged his arms and let him go. On day 28, with only 2 days remaining, Captain Taeyang made a decision. 98% of Velkari were evacuated. The remaining 2% were the sick, the elderly, those too frail to move quickly. Many had given up hope. They believed they were too weak to save. They were wrong. Taeyang personally led the final evacuation teams. He carried an elderly Velkari on his back across 2 kilometers of burning ground. The Velkari elder protested weakly. "I am too old, too sick. I am not worth saving. Save yourself." Taeyang kept walking, his steps steady despite the weight and heat. That is not how humans work. Every person is worth saving. Every single one. But why? Why do you care? Because you are a person. That is all the reason we need. He delivered her safely to the loading zone. She cried and touched his face with her frail hand. "I will remember you. All of us will remember." The final ship lifted off with 4 hours to spare. 4 million Velkari were safe. Every single person evacuated. The human casualties were severe. 1,847 people with serious radiation poisoning, 203 with critical injuries, but 0 deaths. As the fleet reached safe distance, the star finally collapsed. The shockwave hit Velkon Prime like a hammer. The planet's surface was scorched instantly. Everything died. Everything burned. But the Velkari were safe. Aboard human ships, wrapped in human blankets, drinking human water, alive because Deathworlders had refused to let them die. In the observation ships, alien species watched in absolute silence. They had witnessed something that should not have been possible. They had seen humans work in conditions that should have killed them. They had seen endurance beyond reason, determination beyond logic. The Paxiri delegate spoke softly. "We owe them an apology. We called them primitive. We were wrong. The galaxy was about to learn a lesson it would never forget. When everyone else says something is impossible, when every species says it cannot be done, there is one species that will try anyway. The humans, the Deathworlders, the ones who endure." The first human ship broke through Velkon Prime's atmosphere 5 days after leaving Earth. Commander Jiwoo Park sat in the pilot seat, watching the radiation sensors climb higher and higher. The numbers were worse than the report suggested. Much worse. Temperature reading 48 degrees and climbing, her co-pilot reported. Radiation at level 6. Standard suits will fail in 4 hours. Jiwoo nodded calmly. Then we work in 3-hour shifts. Contact the fleet. Tell them to prepare heavy-grade suits for everyone. The ship landed in the main spaceport of the Valkyrie capital. When the doors opened, heat rushed in like a physical wall. Jiwoo felt sweat immediately form on her skin. She pulled on her helmet and stepped out into air that shimmered with heat. A group of Valkyrie waited near the landing pad. They moved slowly, struggling in the heat. Their bodies were designed for cool water and gentle temperatures. Even with cooling suits, they were suffering. The eldest Valkyrie came forward. She moved with difficulty, each step clearly painful. "You came," she whispered. "We did not believe anyone would come." Jiwoo bowed in the human way. "We said we would. Humans keep their promises. But the conditions," the elder gestured around weakly. "This heat kills us slowly. Your people cannot survive here either." Jiwoo removed her helmet. Several Valkyrie gasped and backed away in fear. "What are you doing?" the elder cried. "The air, the heat." Jiwoo took a deep breath. The air was hot and thick but breathable. "We need about 30 minutes before it becomes dangerous," she said calmly. "And yes, it is very hot. But humans evolved in heat. Our bodies handle it better than most species." She put her helmet back on. "We have 40 days to evacuate 4 million people. We need to start immediately. Can you show us to the primary population centers?" The Valkyrie council chamber was cooler, kept at 35 degrees by failing climate systems. Jiwoo spread out holographic maps on the table. Around her, 20 Valkyrie leaders watched with a mixture of hope and disbelief. "We will build loading stations here, here, and here." Jiwoo pointed to the maps. "Each station can process 10,000 people per day. Engineer Doyeon Choi is already landing with construction equipment. We will have the first station ready in 18 hours. A Valkyrie scientist spoke up nervously. "Commander, building in these conditions, the heat, the radiation, workers will collapse. Your people will die. Our people will work in rotating shifts," Jiwoo explained patiently. 4 hours of work, 2 hours of rest, medical monitoring constantly. We have trained for this. But we have watched the radiation levels, another Valkyrie argued. They are rising faster than predicted. Within 2 weeks, they will be in the lethal range even with suits. Your people will adapt, Jiwoo interrupted firmly. We will shorten shifts, add more shielding, find solutions. That is what humans do. The elder spoke quietly. Why do you do this for us? We are nothing to your species. You gain nothing from this except suffering and death. Jiwoo looked at her directly. You are people who need help. That is enough reason. Humans do not calculate whether someone deserves saving. We just save them. The construction began within 2 hours of landing. Engineer Doyeon Choi directed teams of human workers across the scorching spaceport. Massive prefabricated structures were pulled from cargo ships. Heavy machinery rumbled across the ground. The Valkyrie watched in amazement. Humans worked in the 48-degree heat wearing heavy protective suits. They lifted equipment that weighed more than a full-grown Valkyrie. They moved with purpose and speed that seemed impossible. Doyeon himself worked alongside his teams. His suit sensors screamed warnings about heat levels. He ignored them. A massive support beam needed to be positioned. It required 6 people working in perfect coordination. On 3, he called out. 1, 2, 3, lift. The beam rose. The humans moved together, carrying it to the mounting point. Sweat poured down their faces inside the suits. Their muscles burned. They did not slow down. A Valkyrie engineer approached Doyeon carefully. How long can you work like this? Doyeon checked his timer. 2 more hours in this shift. Then I rest for 2 hours. Then 4 more hours of work. And tomorrow, same schedule. Every day until the job is done. But your body will hurt, Doyeon agreed. We'll be tired. We'll complain. But it will keep working. Human bodies are very good at suffering and continuing anyway. The first loading station was completed in 16 hours, not 18. The second station took 14 hours. The third took 12. The human teams were learning, adapting, getting faster. Medic Hire and CO set up the medical facility in a converted warehouse. She had a team of 15 human medics and access to the fleet's entire medical supply. She knew she would need all of it. The first casualties came on day 2. 3 workers collapsed from heat exhaustion. Hire and treated them with cooling procedures and IV fluids. They were back at work 6 hours later. On day 3, a construction accident injured 2 people. Broken bones and radiation burns. HFY set the bones and treated the burns. Both patients refused sedation because they wanted to return to work as soon as possible. A Velkari doctor watched HFY work with obvious confusion. They are injured in pain. Why do they want to return to work? HFY looked up from bandaging a radiation burn on her own arm. Because people need saving. The work is not finished, but you are injured too. You should rest. HFY smiled tiredly. I will rest when everyone is safe. Until then I work. That is not logical. No, HFY agreed. But it is human. By day 5, the evacuation was ahead of schedule. The loading stations were processing 12,000 Velkari per day instead of 10,000. The human workers had adapted to the heat. They moved with practiced efficiency. Captain Taeyang visited the surface on day 6. He walked through the loading stations and watched his people work. They were tired. Their faces showed strain, but they were also focused, determined. He found Jiwoo overseeing a loading operation. She looked exhausted but alert. Report, he said simply. 600,000 evacuated so far, she replied. We are 12% ahead of schedule. Radiation levels are climbing faster than predicted, but we are adjusting shift lengths. No deaths, 47 injuries, all minor. The crew? Tired but functional. Morale is high. Everyone knows what we are doing matters, Taeyang nodded. The assembly is watching. They have observation ships in orbit. They are recording everything. Jiwoo smiled slightly. Let them watch. Maybe they will learn something. That evening, footage began spreading across the galaxy. Videos of humans working in conditions rated as immediately lethal for 70% of known species. Images of human workers carrying Velkari to safety, sometimes 3 or 4 at a time. One video went viral across assembly networks. It showed Doyen finishing a shelter structure. He worked for 11 straight hours because the team was short-handed. When he finished, he collapsed from exhaustion right there on the ground. Other workers rushed to him. They gave him water and food. He rested for exactly 15 minutes. Then he stood up, stretched, and started working on the next shelter. The alien narrator's voice was filled with awe. They just keep going. The Deathworlders just keep going. In the assembly chamber, representatives watched the footage in silence. The Threnody delegates spoke quietly. We called them primitive. We called them reckless. They are reckless, the Paxiri representative replied. But perhaps that is not always a weakness. The Velkari ambassador watched her people being carried to safety by human hands. She watched human medics treating both humans and Velkari without distinction. She watched workers push themselves beyond what should be possible, driven by nothing more than the knowledge that people needed help. They are going to save us, she whispered. The Deathworlders are actually going to save us all. On Velcon Prime, the work continued. Day after day, shift after shift, humans worked in heat that would kill most species. They endured radiation that should have stopped the mission. They carried loads that should have broken them. And they did it with a simple determination that the galaxy was beginning to understand. Humans did not give up. Humans did not quit. When someone needed help, humans would walk through hell itself to provide it. The evacuation was only beginning. The hardest days were still ahead. But the Velkari no longer felt despair. The Deathworlders had arrived, and the Deathworlders never stopped. The emergency beacon flashed red across every communications station in the Galactic Assembly. On the viewing screens, the Velkari ambassador trembled as she spoke. Her blue, translucent skin rippled with fear. Behind her, the images showed her world, Velcon Prime, bathed in dangerous orange light from their dying neighbor star. Please, she whispered. We have 6 weeks. Maybe less. The radiation will kill everyone. We need help to evacuate 4 million people. The assembly chamber fell silent. Representatives from 200 species looked at their data screens. The numbers were terrifying. The radiation levels were already 10 times higher than safety limits. In 6 weeks, they would be 1,000 times higher. Everything on Velcon Prime would die. The Threnody representative spoke first. His voice was gentle but firm. We cannot help. Our bodies fail at anything above 0.7 gravity. The evacuation ships would need to run at 1.8 gravity to make the timeline. We would die. The Paxiri delegate nodded sadly. Our cells break down above 30 degrees. Your world is already at 45 degrees. We cannot survive there. One by one, species after species declined. The Morvash could not do heavy labor for more than 2 hours. The Kentari could not handle the radiation even with suits. The Yulvan did not have ships fast enough. Every species had a reason. Every reason was valid. The Velkari ambassador began to cry. Her tears floated in the low gravity of the chamber. Then we will die, she said. All of us. Our children. Our elders. Our history. Everything. The chamber felt heavy with sorrow. These were good people, kind people. But the mission was impossible. No species in the assembly could survive the conditions needed for the rescue. The math was simple and cruel. Then a voice came from the back of the chamber. We will go, every head turned. The human section was small, barely noticeable. Humans had joined the assembly only 50 years ago. They were still considered primitive by most standards. They came from Earth, a Class 12 death world, a planet so dangerous that most species considered it barely habitable. Captain Taeyang Kim stood up. He was tall by human standards, with dark hair going gray at the temples. He wore the simple uniform of Earth's United Fleet. He walked to the center of the chamber with calm, steady steps. Earth will send a rescue fleet, he said clearly. 12 cargo haulers, 8 military escorts, 2,000 personnel. We can evacuate all 4 million Velkari in 40 days. The chamber erupted in shocked whispers. The Threnody representative stood. Captain Kim, with respect, you do not understand the conditions. The heat alone, 45 degrees Celsius, Taeyang interrupted, rising to perhaps 70 degrees by the end. Yes, we understand. The radiation will require heavy shielding and rotating shifts. Yes. The gravity needed for the ships, 1.8 G sustained. Our crews train at 2 G regularly. The Paxari delegate leaned forward. Captain Kim, these conditions will kill your people. Humans may be more durable than most species, but you are not invincible. The sustained stress will cause organ failure, heat stroke, radiation poisoning. You are volunteering for a death mission. Taeyang met his eyes. Then we die getting them out. The silence that followed was different now. It was not the silence of sorrow. It was the silence of shock. The assembly president, a wise old Korthan, spoke slowly. Captain Kim, Earth has no obligation here. The Velkari are not your allies. You have no treaty with them. You barely know them. Why would you risk so much? Taeyang looked at the Velkari ambassador, who stared at him with wide, disbelieving eyes. Because they asked for help, he said simply. Is there supposed to be another reason? The president had no answer to that. Taeyang continued. Our fleet will depart in 6 hours. We will arrive at Velkon Prime in 5 days. Commander Jiwoo Park will lead the advance team to assess conditions and begin preparations. Engineer Doyen Choi will oversee shelter construction. Medic Hiren Seo will establish medical facilities. He pulled up a holographic display. The other species watched in amazement as he showed detailed plans. Loading zones, evacuation schedules, ship rotations, medical protocols, radiation shielding designs. The humans had already prepared everything. You made these plans before coming here, the president observed. Yes, Taeyang confirmed. We heard the distress call 3 days ago. We started preparing immediately. We knew no one else could go, so we got ready. The Morvash delegate shook his head slowly. You prepared to die for strangers. Before even being asked. We prepared to save 4 million people, Taeyang corrected. Dying is just a possible side effect. We will work to avoid it. The Velkari ambassador floated toward him. Her species moved by swimming through the air in low gravity. She stopped in front of Taeyang and touched his hand carefully. Her skin was cold and wet against his. Why? She whispered. Your people do not know us. We are nothing to Earth. Why would you sacrifice yourselves? Taeyang smiled, though his eyes were serious. In human history, we have an old saying. No one is nothing. You are people. You are in danger. That is all we need to know. But the cost is not as high as the cost of doing nothing, he said firmly. We can save you, so we will. It is that simple. The assembly watched in stunned silence as Taeyang bowed respectfully to the Velkari ambassador, then to the assembly president. We will send regular reports. Our ships launch in 6 hours. We will not fail. He turned and walked out of the chamber. The small human delegation followed him. Their steps were confident, purposeful. They did not look back. After they left, the chamber remained quiet for a long time. Finally, the president spoke. Set up monitoring stations. Record everything. The galaxy needs to see this. See what? The Threnody representative asked. Either the greatest rescue in history, the president said softly, or the moment we learned what Deathworlders are truly capable of. 6 hours later, the human fleet departed Earth orbit. 20 ships accelerating at speeds that would hospitalize most species. Inside those ships, 2,000 humans checked their equipment, reviewed their training, and prepared to work in conditions that the galaxy had declared impossible. None of them talked about dying. They talked about loading schedules and radiation rotation shifts. They talked about how many Velkari each ship could safely carry. They talked about the job ahead, because that was what humans did. When someone needed help, when everyone else said it could not be done, humans looked at the impossible task and said, "Let us try anyway." The fleet jumped to faster than light travel, racing toward a dying world where 4 million people waited in despair. They did not know that help was coming. They did not know that somewhere in the galaxy, a species existed that would walk into hell itself rather than let strangers die. They would learn soon enough. The Deathworlders were coming.